Arsenal, PSG, Barcelona, Inter. These are going to be some of the most dynamic UCL semifinal ties in years, and both matchups are perfect for each other. So let's discuss how they're going to look like and what I think will happen, especially in its first legs. So the team news for Arsenal is they're going to have Partey out for this first leg, which is a huge loss for them. I mean, that's an absolutely massive loss for them. Gabriel's still out. Kiwior's done well to compensate for him, but still a big loss. Gabriel Jesus out, Jorginho out, Havertz out, Tomiyasu out, and then Merino and Ben White doubtful. They're going to need Merino for his game because if with Partey out, someone's going to have to compensate in the midfield. And Merino as a makeshift number 9 has done absolutely insane. I mean, the way he is involved in the build-up, the way he occupies center backs to allow Arsenal to build up from the midfield, he's just been insane. And then he's also gotten the goals as well. He's gotten the assists as well. So he's been unbelievable. The fact that Partey's out means he's probably not going to play number 9. And the fact that he might not even be starting in this game means that at some point in this game, he's not going to be available for the number 9 position or just at all. And that's going to be a big loss from them. But I still think Arsenal have very, very, very strong structure, and they're a bit more pragmatic than PSG. According to this SofaScore over here, PSG have no players missing, which is a massive advantage. And this is their lineup, of course. We all know it's going to be Donnarumma, Hakimi, Marquinhos, Pacho, Mendes, Neves, Vitinha, Ruiz. You know, this is a typical Dembele, Due, Kvaratskhelia. And then they also are going to have Barcola off the bench. They're going to have an actual number 9 possible off the bench with Gonzalo Ramos. So PSG are looking at full strength. And if you look at the recent results of both teams, PSG have been a bit more shaky than Arsenal. And Arsenal, of course, have looked stronger. Arsenal were more convincing in their quarterfinal tie. And then, of course, their recent Ligue 1 game, PSG, they suffered their first Ligue 1 defeat of the season. So I think PSG have slightly dropped in form a little bit from when we were discussing them in about February, March. But they're still devastating with the attack. Their midfield is still unreal circulators. Their fullbacks are unbelievable going up. And, of course, they provide the structure defensively. But I think Arsenal are the favorites overall for this tie in terms of how it's set up, how the team is set up. They're a team that is very risk averse. When they attack, they don't really risk too much, but they create a lot. We look at that Arsenal versus Real Madrid second leg, even the first leg as well, but the second leg especially, when Arsenal picked their moments to attack, which is actually a good amount of moments considering Real Madrid should have been the team all over them. Arsenal looked very precise. They looked very dangerous when they did have the ball. Saka on the right side was creating so much. Rice was intercepting everything that Madrid was trying to do, and then allowing Arsenal to attack from it. And then, of course, with Merino up top, you know, everything was coming together. But of course, I think their defense is very strong. Arteta's zonal defensive tactics, where each player needs to be when a team is attacking in whatever zones they're attacking in, his tactics for that defensively are just ridiculous. Of course, Luis Skelly as the inverted fullback, he surprised me a lot this season, especially in the recent UCL knockout ties. He's been insane. His build with his technical ability, this is a huge talent that Arsenal have in their hands, and he is so important to their system because, especially now with Partey being out, he's gonna have to have a bit more cover, and Rice may actually have to move in a bit more centrally or to the right to help cover for that Partey loss. But Luis Skelly, he's gonna have a big task on his hands because we all know he's been playing as an inverted fullback, and the right winger or the left winger or just the width of PSG in general is devastating. So he's gonna have a big task on his hands. Kiwior's gonna have to do what he's been doing in absence of Gabriel. Saliba's been monstrous. He absolutely just locked up Mbappe in that second leg and in the first leg. Mbappe was trying to find moments to abuse his pace. Saliba said, "Nope, get out of here," and that's how it was for them. Raya's been good overall in the keeping department. Of course, he's been coming out for crosses a lot and helping in the build up. He's also been very good in that regard. And the only disappointing player I've seen so far has been Odegaard. He didn't have the best of games against Madrid in general. He was a bit better as the second leg went, you know, further and further on. But in the start, he had far too many chances where Arsenal could have done more from it, and he just simply didn't have the physicality. He didn't have the ability to make something happen when he did have the ball in those early stages of the game. Of course, Saka with that penalty. You don't shoot a penalty like that in an important game like that, whether you have a 1-0 lead, whether you have a 3-0, 10-0 lead, you don't take a penalty like that. Overall, though, Saka has been immense for them, and he's been the reason why they've been so good against Real Madrid and recently. Let's talk about a bit more about PSG now. I think they've been slightly overrated in general, and I think it showed when they went against Aston Villa, a very well structured team that has a manager that knows how to manage knockout games. And like we said here, listen, they drew to Nantes, they lost to Nice, and yes, they already won the league, but they've still been going to these games as close as possible to full strength, except giving some players rest. And they haven't been looking as they were looking like in this stage over here in March, early April, February. Of course, they also lost to Aston Villa that game. And to be honest, based on that game, they were slightly fortunate to even get out of that quarterfinal encounter and go through to the semifinal. So they also have their flaws. Of course, historically, their defense has been a bit shaky in the big moments. Their defense in general, though, this season has been much stronger, but they still have that bozo gene in the big moments. Their midfield is very strong. Their strength is ball circulation and finding their wingers in the half spaces and that overall their passing, breaking up defensive lines. But of course, Vitinha, Ruiz, Neves, they all have their defensive strengths. But I think a very good attacking side that has strong defensive abilities can make them pay. And I think Arsenal will be that team. Dembele, of course, he's been very good as their false nine this season. Due has been ridiculous off the bench or when starting. And of course, Kvaratskhelia, since he signed in January, has been immense in general. I mean, he's been so big for them in some moments. But overall, this PSG team, in some games, like the Aston Villa game recently, has been a moments team where they were fortunate to even, like I said, get out of that quarterfinal time, make it to the semifinal, and it was because of the moments that the first leg showed from them. And if they didn't get that third goal with Nuno Mendes, who knows where they would be right now? Of course, their loss is that they have a false nine in Dembele. If they had a number 9, they would have been a bit more stable. But with Dembele there, of course, you have another dynamic option where he can drop a bit deeper and has the ability to get past players and create as their false nine. But where this issue comes in for them is if you look at PSG and when they attack, especially against this Arsenal team, how it will look like. PSG, when they have a team pinned back in their box, they don't have that incisive pass option that that their midfielders usually find, and they don't really have that number 9 that can occupy the center backs in the box to allow more space to be created for people to make the runs diagonally inside or just in general towards the box. And what they do in that situation is they just pass the ball around the box forever until somebody can take a shot from distance, which is what Doué did against Villa. I mean, their equalizer was a long shot when Villa were pinned back, and they have this issue, PSG, especially in the counter. They are a bit vulnerable. I think Arsenal's a favorite here. I'm gonna predict the first leg. I will say, since Arsenal's home, I'm gonna say 2-1 Arsenal in the first leg, and then in the second leg, I will say 2-2 in the second leg, and Arsenal go in advance with a 1-goal margin, and they will get the job done. So Arsenal to be in the final, in my opinion, and of course PSG will be in the final if they can get the job done. Of course, I think they have a chance of it. Obviously, every team does here, but it will have to come down to see how devastating their attack is and if their team can defend transitions well. But defensively, structured-wise, I pick Arsenal. Now, we've discussed this matchup pretty long here. Let's go now to the Inter versus Barcelona tie. Now, this has a lot of talking points here because recently these teams have a lot of background to them in terms of who's available for their teams, their recent form, a lot of stuff to discuss here. So, the team news. Barcelona, Lewandowski out. He'll probably not be available till he might not even make it to either of these legs, but we're not sure about that. Asado's still out for this. Bernal's still out for this. And Bale is probably not going to be available for the first leg on Wednesday, but he might be available for the second leg, which would be absolutely huge, especially away. Inter, on the other hand, Pavard got injured on the weekend. We're not sure if he's going to be available yet for them this Wednesday, but he could be. Carboni injured. Correa injured, and Thuram out. So the main men out for Inter are Pavard and Thuram. Thuram might actually be available for Wednesday. He's looking to be actually make that game, and his recovery has been lightning fast. I'm not sure how he's done it. He might be available for that though. Now, if you look at the lineups, of course, both teams are set up differently. We're gonna have Chesney, probably Gerard Martin, although based on how the Clasico ended on Saturday, we could possibly see Inigo Martinez at left back and Araujo starting as center back instead. We have to wait and see about that. But for now, Martinez, Kubarsi, Kunde after that big game of rest that he had against Mallorca, that was a huge game for him to get rest because he's played 105 straight games for France and Barcelona. And after that game of rest that he had, where he didn't play, he was immense against Real Madrid. De Jong and Pedri in the midfield, which I have a lot to talk about that. Rafinha, probably Olmo, Yamal, and Ferran Torres up top. Now, on Barcelona side, they did not play the best game, or really, in general, a really good game against Real Madrid. And I'll tell you why. The reason why Madrid was allowed to actually impose themselves on any level against Barcelona was because Barca lacks a real DM. Pedri couldn't do that much. He was feeling the fatigue overall. He's played a lot of minutes this season. He was feeling the fatigue. And De Jong is not strong enough defensively. And in general, he wasn't the best overall on Saturday in the build-up, and especially not defensively. When Barcelona has somebody here, like Gavi maybe, who's a way better duel winner, Casado possibly, but he's not going to be available. And then when hopefully Bernal comes back next season and picks up form, when they have that option here of a more defensive midfielder, even possibly Eric Garcia can play here. They are way better structured. They win balls way better and they hold possession way better because they just don't concede transitions that quickly. Madrid, every time they received the ball, they were basically on the counter instantly, and they were looking to enter the final third almost every single time. Of course, Rafinha did have a great game. We're going to look to see him have a great game on against Inter, though, because he's going to be important, and he has to finish his chances. I didn't finish against Madrid. Olmo, I was disappointed with him against Madrid. He didn't have the worst of games. He didn't have a bad game in general, but he didn't really impose himself the way he usually does. If he can do that against Inter and break down their structure, which we'll talk about pretty soon here, listen, he will be immense. He just has to impose himself a bit more, and hopefully he can have that impact. One, I'm not sure if he's going to start yet. Maybe Flick opts for Gavi or Fedemine for that third bit more defensive midfielder option, but we'll see how that looks like. Yamal has to do what Yamal does, and Torres has to have that presence again. He didn't really have a good game against Madrid, in my opinion. He had an 8.0 rating for some reason because of the goal, probably, but overall, he did well in terms of pressing and getting that goal. Everything else wasn't too great for him, but in general, he's done a good job to compensate for Lewandowski. Now let's go to Inter side. Now they're gonna have Sommer, Bastoni, Acerbi, that's standard. Bisek instead of Pavard because he's not gonna be able to make it. They're gonna have Darmian. I'm not sure if Dumfries is available yet, but Darmian's been doing well for them recently. DiMarco, of course, on the left, he's been very good in general. And then of course the midfield of Mkhitaryan, Çalhanoğlu, and Barella, and that's a very strong midfield. That's a main part of their team, in my opinion. These three, especially Çalhanoğlu and Barella, have been just ridiculous this season, and they are the engine for that counterattack that these guys deploy. Lautaro Martinez, of course, he's going to be a very important player to watch, especially if Barcelona have Araujo on. They might have him on Lautaro the whole game because he's going to be a very important player to watch for Inter on the counterattacks and the hold-up play. And then we're probably looking at Arnautovic instead of Thuram. I'm not sure also where Taremi is. Maybe he's not available, but it doesn't say it here. But this is the lineup for Inter. Now, how Inter defends is, of course, the mid block, or they go into a deep block once they get pinned back. This is typical Italian style, typical Inter Milan, and we have to. They're not as defensive as, for example, the 2010 Inter team. They're not as anti-football as that team, but they have their defensive structure like Arsenal. They're very strong defensively, and then of course, their counter is devastating. DiMarco on the wing, Darmian on the wing. The passes that Çalhanoğlu and Barella find, Mkhitaryan making the runs in behind, Lautaro with his other striker, whoever it may be, combining. They are very good. You look at that first goal they scored against Bayern in the first leg. That was an insane goal from them, and that is how they're probably going to try to score against Barcelona. Barca have to have the strong defensive transition structure because they can eat goals here. Now, of course, the difference between Barcelona and PSG is that, of course, they're both of the teams in the semi-final of their respective opponents, that they are the more attacking side. They're the more devastating side when they're on their game. They're the team that's probably going to score the more goals if everything goes in their favor, because they're the teams that obviously attack more. But the difference is that when Barca enters a box, well, first of all, they're in general they're a bit more direct than PSG. They're a bit more vertical than PSG when attacking, but they have that number 9. Ferran Torres is more of a number 9 than Dembele is as a false 9. And when Barca enters a box, when they have a team pinned back, that number 9 will do the better job of occupying the center backs. And once again, like I said before, allowing space for the other players to make the runs in and find space to take shots. That's where the difference lies for Barcelona and PSG. And then, of course, hopefully Barca's midfield does a better job of defending transitions than PSG does. But overall, let's take a look at how these teams have looked like recently, and this is where it becomes interesting because Barcelona had a very, very poor performance. Well, this is how it looked like. They drew to Real Betis. It wasn't really a good performance. They played against Dortmund at home, 4-0, like very good game. And to be honest, and from what I've said before, Barca in this game, whether they won 4-0, 1-0, or they lost, in whatever it may be, Barca ate far too many chances from Dortmund. They ate far too many transition attacks from Dortmund, and it didn't look good defensively and defending transitions as I wanted it to. And we'll see. I'll show you this after this that, of course, they played Leganés next, and the same thing happened. Leganés is not a good team. They've caused issues for the bigger teams in La Liga in general this season, but once again, Barca did not play well that game, and they were eating up a lot of attacks to that Leganés team. The same thing against Dortmund. This was probably one of the Barca's worst games this season against Dortmund, and it was just poor all around. The only player who was very good this game was Chesney. Other than that, it was poor all around, and I didn't like the way Barca played. Then, of course, they conceded 3 shocking goals to Celta Vigo. They played a very good game against Mallorca, but they weren't efficient enough. And then, similarly against Madrid, they played a very good game, but they weren't efficient enough because I'm sorry, they played a bad game, but they managed to get the win. They were actually pretty efficient in this game. In general, I think Barcelona have been doing well to get the results, whether they played good, insane, or bad in whatever games they've been winning. But if you look at Inter, this is shocking from them recently. They managed to get the job done against Bayern with the 2-2 draw at home in the second leg, which, to be honest, in general, that tie, they were fortunate to win. They lost 1-0 to Bologna in a big, and I mean big, game for them because they are neck and neck with Napoli in the Serie A race. They lost to Milan in the Coppa Italia knockout stage, 3-0 in the second leg. Now, this Milan team this year is not special. If anything, they're pretty poor. To lose 3-0 to them is no joke. And then, of course, they lost 1-0 to Roma yesterday, and now their Coppa Italia is done. They're done in that. Their league is looking pretty shaky now, and of course, they have to play against Barca in the UCL on Wednesday. Now, momentum-wise, Barcelona has the advantage here. I think in general, Barca is a favorite for this game because of how incisive, how direct they've been, and how, in general, how strong their attack has been. And then I think their midfield and defense has been good enough to get the job done, whether they play a high line or not. Overall, I have this game, this first leg, Barca being home in the first leg. I have it at, to be honest, listen, people talk about Inter's defense. They've been conceding a lot of chances. They've been conceding a lot of goals. I see it as a 3-1 Barca win in the first leg. And in the second leg, I see either a 1-1 draw and Barca to go through with a 2-goal advantage, or a 1-goal Inter win, like a 2-1 Inter win, and Barca to go through with a 1-goal advantage. So overall, I have Barca and Arsenal in the final. And in general, I'm just excited. I'm excited to watch these games. I hope Inter don't do the anti-football of just completely parking the bus. I don't think they will because they're not the 2010 version under Mourinho. But I hope they don't do that because that will do anything but make me watch a good game. If they play like that, it's not going to be fun to watch. Hopefully they try to at least impose themselves a little bit attacking wise. And let's see if Barcelona can get the job done. Like I said, Arsenal and Barcelona to be in the final for me. I've had that as the case since the quarterfinal, kind of. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Of course, I'll do the Barcelona versus Inter Milan match review. I might also do an Arsenal versus PSG match review. But listen, end of the season, every game's big. Every game is a final. Every game is a must-win. Get the job done. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video.